Welcome to Leading the Way, a StoneTurn podcast series. StoneTurn's Leading the Way podcast series highlights the top compliance, legal, and anti-fraud practitioners who are breaking down silos and setting new standards for excellence worldwide. Before we begin, a word about StoneTurn. Who do you turn to for help enhancing your compliance program? Who do you turn to for on-demand investigative services and data analytics expertise? Turn to us, StoneTurn. Since 2004, counsel, corporations, and government agencies have turned to the global advisory firm StoneTurn when facing their greatest challenges. Let StoneTurn lead the way when it comes to complex regulatory, risk, and compliance issues, investigations, and business disputes. In this episode, Valerie Charles visits with Kara Gordon.
Hi there. We're so happy today to have Kara Gordon with us. Kara has had a distinguished career in compliance, serving as the CCO at Dow Chemical and more recently at Baker Hughes. Welcome, Kara. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
No, absolutely. How did you, if we go back to sort of the beginning of your career, how did you get interested in compliance and how did you kind of land there? I always find that to be an interesting question because it's not normally where, it isn't usually somebody's clear intention.
Right. Yeah. And it certainly wasn't mine. My background and specialty is employment and labor law. So I think I first started being involved in compliance in that role at Dow in terms of my interaction with the compliance group and working on investigation procedures and other policies, and then reviewing and discussing various investigation outcomes and how we would handle them. So I think at first it was completely unintentional, my involvement in compliance, but as the years went on, the person who led compliance at Dow took an early retirement to go to another company, and I was asked to step into the role. And despite the big learning curve that I had, that was a good fit for me. So I've enjoyed it a lot.
What do you think your sort of leadership style, how would you describe your leadership style or advice that you have, for women in compliance who want to step into management roles? Yeah,
so I'm a very, and you know this, Val, just from our past interactions, I'm a very what you see is what you get kind of person generally, and in not only in my personal life, but in my professional life. So I really strongly believe in transparency to the extent that we can provide that in leadership roles as well. I mean, of course, there's always times when there's things that are happening that we're not free to share because it's just not public information yet, or it's not something that we can share with our teams. But except other than that, I'm very much in favor of sharing the real truth about what's happening and using the team's resources to figure out how we're going to move to the next step, whatever it is, whether it's determining the goal or how to get to a goal that's been decided and communicated to us. So I feel really strongly about, again, transparency and just sharing the truth, right? This is where we are. This is where we'd like to be. And can you guys help me to figure out how to get there to the extent that I can?
No, that makes sense. I mean, when you think about workplace culture and sort of where we are right now in this work from home environment, do you feel like compliance leaders are having a harder time, sort of cultivating that the cultural part of our jobs, right? As compliance folks, and or maybe even the speak up culture. I don't know if I have heard across the board. Maybe there are some fewer numbers of reporters and whistleblowers during this time. What do you think? What do you think we can be doing to continue fostering culture and encouraging speak up culture?
Yeah, so just like everyone else in corporate America and in corporate environments around the world, right? We have had to pivot somewhat and figure out what we're going to do. Personally, we had our first Integrity Month scheduled for March 2020, right? So we spent 8 months, I think, working on all of the different um, events and other aspects of Integrity Month 2020. And then COVID came and we were sort of underway at the end of February, start of March, and had to pivot and figure out like, okay, now what, right? And honestly, just to share my instinctive first reaction, it was like, this is not as important as people's health and safety or, saving the company. But what I found when I kind of recovered from that first reaction was that employees and leaders in the company were very much committed to moving forward with a commitment to compliance and to meeting our goals. So I kind of had to push past my own initial reaction, right? And say, okay, yes, all of this is happening, but that does not mean that integrity, a culture of integrity and compliance is not as important. So we still have to make that work. And how are we going to do it? Our Integrity Month had really big metric goals in mind. And even with COVID, we met them all, So I was really impressed with the leadership's ability to translate what we had. And what we had was a plan in place that would be any people leader within the company would have an Integrity Matters session. And we gave them materials to do that with any direct reports. So that's pretty big undertaking in a company with 70,000 people. But you know what? We met the goals. And not only that, but we met the goals and above the goals in China, in Italy, in other parts of Asia and other parts of Europe where there were particular huge COVID hits. So I think what I learned is that, leadership and our team can transcend anything, right? Even these horrible times and circumstances. And I was really proud of the fact of what the response was, and sort of wondered why my first reaction was, let's just stand down and let's not bug anybody about compliance stuff right now, right? It was just my first reaction, but it was not where people wanted to be.
It's interesting. I feel like that there's an analogy there to kind of everything. I mean, in some ways, of course, we're all further apart, but then there's a commonality to everybody's experience globally right now. So when you do have that call and you get on the video screen, there's, I think, a bit more personal sharing and somebody's dog hops up in the video screen or somebody's kid walks by and, you kind of get these very human moments and glimpses. And so, in that way, maybe that's a silver lining to some of this ongoing difficulty.
I think there's so many silver linings to all of this, and just people coming together and trying to support each other in so many ways, right? Whether it's an affinity network or a functional team or a business team, whatever, just people really stepping up and trying to have empathy and thinking about people other than ourselves, right?
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, these are traditionally male-dominated industries. So I'd love to hear of any, challenges or opportunities that you see for women or just, I don't know, stories or successes that you have from thinking of it, kind of being at the table in industries that are, historically more male dominated spaces.
Yeah, I think I've been so fortunate in that I've had, I was saying this to someone yesterday, there are so many really smart people out there, really, really, really smart people, like people who are number one in every class and the top of their game, no matter what they do. But maybe they haven't had the same opportunities, right? So I feel like so lucky, blessed, however you want to put it, right? But I've had some great leaders with wonderful opportunities, and I'm so grateful for that. Honestly, I have not had an experience where I felt like, well, this isn't going to work because I'm a woman versus, if I had been a man. There are certainly times when, as part of a leadership team, whether it's in legal or otherwise in a corporation, where I've had to, well, maybe I didn't have to, but I thought about adjusting my style to fit, the other personalities in the room, and whether that was top leaders who were posturing or ego driven or whatever it is, right? And what personally I've learned is that doesn't work for me. When I try to go ego for ego or, really put myself in the same high regard as some other people seem to do, it doesn't work for me. And what has worked for me is just being myself and just being honest and straightforward and not trying to be a leader who is quote unquote more male oriented or anything other than what I really am, right? So anytime I've tried to be, they say when women are assertive, they call us aggressive, versus men being the same way, and they're just great drivers of whatever and leaders, right? So I've sort of said to myself, okay, I need to be more aggressive, and that hasn't worked for me at all. Like what has worked is just being myself and trying to drive the message and not being afraid to do that. So I think that's been the key. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it does. I mean, I consistently think that there's more than a way to skin a cat, as my dad would say. And I think, being authentic is critical. And I think there's more than one type of leader who can be successful in compliance. And I think that there's just different ways to do it. And I think being authentic is a really good piece of advice.
And trying to be someone else doesn't always work. Like trying to take a characteristic and say, okay, I am now going to be very assertive, right? It's not, and it just doesn't work if it's not authentic and you're not all there. So,
well, let's think about maybe just a little bit about how you go about operating your program. I mean, these days when people think about programs, I think there's a lot of focus on technology and on being data driven. What's your feeling about that? I talked to some leaders in the industry who are kind of rushing to make sure that they are what's considered, cutting edge program. And then there are others that say, look, we have to meet the culture of the company where it is today. And it's not in a place that's going to be this, perfect data driven solution where things can be immediately automated. And I think there's, rational. I think it's rational to feel either way. And I wonder kind of how you feel about this more recent emphasis on data and on analytics becoming such an important part of running a program.
Sure. And in my most recent role, that was one of my biggest objectives was, how to modernize a really world-class compliance program, but how to bring it into, a more modern current environment. And one of those things that comes up is having an app, right? Like, so there's an app for everything now. Anything you can think of that you do in your life, you kind of say to yourself, oh, let me check. Is there an app for how to manage my finances, store my receipts, do my travel, check my whatever it is. And I don't think that so far from what I've seen, I have not found an app that would be, a good, would give us good results. So to have technology just to have it doesn't make any sense to me. To use technology to get better metrics, data, et cetera, and move forward does, of course. So, I guess my suggestion and advice on that is just, there's salespeople who come at us in all kinds of ways every day, whether it's on LinkedIn or email or however, right? And some of them are offering really great offerings. But some of them will not work with your culture or environment or give you the results that you need. And I feel really strongly that I don't want to go out on a limb and say, here's a great product, here's a great opportunity, let's invest this money in this, and then it doesn't work, right? So, I think that it makes a lot of sense as long as it's proven and there's metrics to show that it works and that it will be well integrated into our own culture.
Before we go, do you have any thoughts about the future of the compliance space? I guess, especially as we continue to navigate and eventually emerge from the COVID crisis, but also just more generally. I mean, do you think that the recent work from home issues or other cultural issues that we're dealing with have fundamentally changed compliance and the way that we're going to operate?
Well, look, I mean, I think that the current situation has changed how corporate America and corporate global is operating generally, right? So many companies are realizing that they can reduce their footprint. They can do, when I just think about my most recent company and the footprint, the rent, the mortgage, right? The insurance, the cafeteria, the workers, the cleaners, the materials, like everything that goes into keeping a piece of real estate functioning for an office. I think this is giving great opportunity for executive leadership to consider how that's going to work. And I think that so many people, not just in my own companies, but in others, thought, wow, how are we going to make sure people are working when they're working from home? And I think the answer has been astounding in that we see that people are not only working as much, but working above and beyond what was expected. It's almost to the other extreme where we have to make sure people are balancing work-life situations. Because I go, if I turn on my computer and my email at 9:00 at night, half my team is still online. Which makes me think like, these are people in the U.S. Why are they still having to work at this time of night, to make it work? So I think just really being appreciative and cognizant of the fact that people are rising to our expectations and then some, right? And then trying to help them balance that as we move forward.
I'm with you. I am a person who, even before joining StoneTurn, I was remote with a big part of my organization, sitting partially in New York and partially in Europe. And so for me, it wasn't such a big shift. But I think for many people, it is a totally new world to work from home. And you're right. The tendency to sort of blend and extend the day, I think is great and has been an interesting development. I mean, not that, I do think lots of people trust their employees, but to your point, I don't know that anybody would have said people are going to be more productive. People are going to be, online more. I think that's a surprise, and I'm hearing it fairly consistently throughout, inside and even outside of compliance.
It's really, it just shows like how people are committed to their roles and their jobs, and they're loyal to their companies and trying to do everything they can to make it work, right? Which is not something we would necessarily have expected, but is a happy.
Well, Kara, it's a pleasure to catch up with you as always. You're a favorite of mine in the space, and I'm very glad that we had this opportunity to chat and share some of your thoughts with the listeners. And I look forward to catching up again in short order.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much, Val, and thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Take care.
Okay. You too.
Thank you for listening to Leading the Way, a StoneTurn podcast. For more information about StoneTurn, check out the show notes for their website, which is www.stoneturn.com. Leading the Way is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.